My husband and I have been married for 18 years. Once, that meant something magical. We were passionate, curious about each other, full of energy and plans and touch. We'd go on long drives just to talk, stay up late watching old movies, and make love like we were afraid the world might end tomorrow. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. The spark that had once kept us connected started to flicker, and then quietly faded. For the past 10 years, yes, a full decade, there's been little to no sex between us. At first, I told myself it was understandable. He's a hard-working man in a demanding job, with long hours and more responsibilities than he ever signed up for. Stress can kill desire, I know that. But as the years wore on, excuses started to feel hollow. Eventually, I had to face a painful truth. He just wasn't attracted to me anymore. And while that realization stung, I told myself it was okay. These things happen. We get older, hormones change, libido fades. I figured, this is just part of the deal. Still, I missed the warmth, the closeness, the sheer pleasure of being wanted. So, I adapted. I found ways to satisfy myself, ways to reconnect with my own body and its needs. I built a private collection of toys that gave me what he no longer did. And sometimes, perhaps foolishly, I'd use them right in front of him, half hoping it might stir something in him. A touch of curiosity, a flicker of desire. But nothing. He'd just lie there, watching. Sometimes he'd give a polite nod at the end and say something like, "That looked nice." But he never touched me, never touched himself, never reached out, and I swore I was fine with it, that I had accepted it. Then everything changed. Unexpectedly, abruptly, at a friend's birthday party just before lockdown began. Andy couldn't make it that night. Work again, so I went alone. The house was warm with laughter, music floating through the air, and people mingling with wine glasses in hand. I didn't expect anything extraordinary, but then I met Paul. He was a colleague of my friend's, older, charming, a university lecturer with a gentle confidence that drew me in, instantly. He wasn't classically handsome, but there was something magnetic about him. The way he looked at me with those dark, thoughtful eyes. The ease with which he spoke about music, travel, food, things I used to love but had stopped talking about because no one at home seemed interested. It started so innocently. We talked, laughed, found connections in places I hadn't expected. And yet with every passing moment I felt it, the warmth rising inside me, unfamiliar and overwhelming. I tried to dismiss it, chalk it up to the wine. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it grew. I kept drifting back to him through the evening, like gravity was pulling me. When my friend offered me the spare room to crash in, I didn't hesitate. I texted Andy to say I'd be home in the morning, and I stayed. Paul stayed too. My friend offered him the couch, and then left us in the kitchen with 2 half-full glasses of red. We kept talking. Softer now, more intimate. And then, I found myself opening up. I told him, hesitantly at first, then more freely, about the silence in my marriage, the absence of touch, the ache I'd buried for years. My voice cracked. I tried to stop, but then he reached across the table and took my hand. I felt the heat of it in my chest. One moment, we were sitting side by side. The next, I was in his arms, being kissed in a way I hadn't been kissed in a very, very long time. There's no clean line I can draw between what's right and what's wrong. All I know is that I didn't resist. I needed it. Desperately. We moved to the spare bedroom. The door clicked shut. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt alive again. The way he touched me, the way he looked at me, it wasn't just physical. It was reverent, electric. He listened to my body in ways Andy never had. I lost count of how many times I came. I cried at one point, not from guilt, but from something like release. He fell asleep beside me, and I lay awake, tangled in sheets and confusion. I was glowing and gutted all at once. I'd just betrayed the man I'd spent nearly 2 decades with, and I'd enjoyed every second of it. At dawn, I slipped out quietly, walked the 2 miles home in the cold morning air, my head spinning. I showered endlessly, terrified that Andy would smell another man on me. But when he came home from work that evening, he was oblivious. He kissed my cheek like always, asked how my night had been. I lied, and he believed me. I told myself it was a one-time mistake. I'd bury it deep and move on. But then lockdown began, and suddenly we were confined in the same space, day after day. No escape. And the guilt, instead of fading, grew louder. It seeped into every corner of my mind. I couldn't talk to him without feeling the weight of what I'd done. I couldn't look in the mirror without flinching. Eventually, even Andy noticed. And that's saying something. He's never been great at picking up on my moods. One night he asked me outright, "What's wrong?" I broke. The guilt came pouring out of me like floodwater. I told him everything, every detail. I didn't look at him once. I couldn't bear to see his face. But instead of rage or heartbreak or accusations, he came to me, held me, and said, "I understand why you did it. I'm not surprised." I was stunned. And then something strange happened. I got angry. Not just confused, angry. Why wasn't he mad? Why wasn't he devastated, like I would have been if the roles were reversed? Then came the next twist. He started asking questions. Not just casual ones, specific ones. What did Paul do to me? How did it feel? What positions? How many times? Was it better than with him? And as I answered, reluctantly, painfully, I noticed something I never expected to see again. He was aroused, hard, visibly. His face flushed, breathing shallow. And suddenly I was thrown into a whole new spiral of emotion. Disgust, shock, confusion, pain. Was he turned on by this? I pulled back, told him I didn't want to talk about it anymore. He said he understood, said I was forgiven. But the look on his face told a different story. Not of forgiveness, but fascination. And that left me more hollow than anything else. I realized I'd wanted his fury, his jealousy, anything that would prove he still wanted me. Instead, he got off on the idea of another man doing what he hadn't done in a decade. He's tried to bring it up again since. I've shut him down every time. I don't know what this means for us, for our marriage. For me, because here's the truth. I feel more alone now than I did before I cheated, and I don't know how to come back from that. In the days that followed my confession, the air in our home felt different. Not heavy with tension, but thick with something unspoken. A strange kind of openness settled between Andy and me, like we had pulled back a curtain that could never be closed again. He began treating me with a gentleness I hadn't seen in years. Small things. Making my tea the way I liked it. Standing beside me in the kitchen longer than necessary. Touching my shoulder as he passed behind me, not in a sexual way, but with a kind of reverence. Like I was fragile. I should have felt grateful, relieved, but I didn't. What I felt, more than anything, was confusion. A deep, gnawing dissonance. I had shattered something, but he wasn't bleeding. I had betrayed him, but he wasn't broken. He wasn't angry, or distant, or defensive. If anything, he seemed more present than ever. It didn't make sense. It still doesn't. One night, about a week later, I came out of the shower wrapped in a towel. I wasn't trying to be seductive. I hadn't felt seductive in years. But there was something about the way he looked at me that made me pause. There was hunger in his eyes. Not just arousal, but something sharper, raw, real. And for a moment, my body responded in kind. My pulse quickened. My skin tingled. I wanted to believe it, that maybe my confession had cracked something open in him. But then he spoke. "Do you think he liked watching you undress?" His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed him. He was turned on again. I froze. Just like that, the moment was gone. I dried myself quickly, went to the bedroom, and shut the door behind me. That night, he tried to initiate something for the first time in what felt like forever. He didn't touch me, just lay beside me, whispering questions. Was he rough? With you? Did he pull your hair? Did you ask him to go down on you? Did you like it better than with me? Each question hit like a stone in water, sending ripples through my already fragile sense of reality. He was aroused again. More than aroused. On the edge. He was touching himself under the sheets. Quietly, while I stared at the ceiling in disbelief. Turned over and said, "Andy, please stop." He paused, just long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry," then turned away. I lay awake for hours. Reckonings. I started spending more time alone during the day, working in the garden, going on long walks, sitting in cafes just to be somewhere else. I needed space. I needed silence that didn't include him. Paul never contacted me again. I hadn't expected him to, and I was oddly grateful for the clean break. What happened that night had been electric, yes, but it was also a kind of rupture, a gateway, and I had stepped through it. Not just into another man's arms, but into another version of myself, a version I wasn't ready to meet. The truth is, I don't just miss sex. I miss feeling wanted, seen, desired not just for my body, but for my mind, for my laugh, for the things I say when I'm half asleep, for the way I dance in the kitchen when my favorite song comes on. I miss being loved like I'm still a mystery worth unraveling. Andy used to look at me that way. A long time ago. Now it seems he only sees me clearly when I'm with someone else. He said something that caught me off guard. I've been reading about something called cuckold fantasies. Apparently it's not that uncommon. I didn't know that's what it was, but I think that's what I'm feeling. When you told me about Paul, it made me want you more than I have in years. I put down my fork. So you want me because someone else had me? He didn't deny it. He just said, maybe. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. I didn't sign up to be a character in someone's kink. I didn't cheat to spice things up. I cheated because I felt invisible, because I was starving, and now that I've tasted what I was missing, I don't know if I can go back to pretending I'm full. Crossroads, we've started going to therapy, individually, for now. I need to figure out who I am again. What I want. Whether I can rebuild something from the rubble, or whether it's time to walk away from it entirely. Andy asked if we could try being intimate again. I told him I'm not ready. Not while his arousal is tangled up in my betrayal. I don't know where this story ends. I'm not even sure what chapter I'm in. But I do know this. I don't want to go back to sleepwalking through life. I want to feel awake. I want to feel alive. Maybe that means rediscovering Andy. Maybe it means rediscovering myself without him. Either way, I can't unsee what I've seen. And I won't pretend I didn't drink deeply from that cup of water after years of thirst. Because I did, and it changed me. Therapy was something I never thought I'd try, not seriously. I had always imagined it as a couch and a box of tissues while someone asked, "How did that make you feel?" But after everything that happened, with Paul, with Andy, with me, I realized I was standing at a kind of emotional cliff edge. And either I jumped, or I figured out how to step back with grace. My therapist, Maya, was soft-spoken, but not soft. She listened without judgment, but had this unnerving ability to cut right through my carefully worded evasions. Within 2 sessions, she looked at me and asked, "Are you angry with him for not punishing you?" The question hit like cold water. I stammered something about guilt and shame, but she pressed on. "It's not uncommon for someone who's betrayed a partner to crave consequences, not because they want to suffer, but because they need proof that it still matters, that they still matter." That was it. That was the thing I hadn't been able to name. Andy's forgiveness felt too easy, too clean, like a skip step in a dance. It made me feel disposable, like even my betrayal wasn't enough to shake him. Maya told me something else that stuck. Sometimes, when we feel invisible for too long, we do something dramatic. Not just to be seen by someone else, but to see ourselves again. That was Paul. Paul wasn't just a man at a party, he was a mirror. For one night I saw myself again through someone else's hungry, fascinated gaze. I was real, desired, alive. And now that reflection haunted me more than any guilt ever could. The couples session. After several solo sessions, Andy and I agreed to try couples therapy. He was nervous. I was defensive, but we both showed up, and that counted for something. The therapist asked us to talk about why we were there. Andy spoke first. "I miss my wife," he said. "Not just physically. I miss how she used to laugh. I miss how she used to let me in. That might have melted me once. But now I wasn't sure who he missed. Me. Or the version of me he thought I was before. When it was my turn, I took a breath and said what I'd never said out loud. I stopped trying to connect with you because I felt like I was yelling into a void. I tried everything. Talking, initiating, even pleasuring myself right in front of you. And nothing changed. Eventually, I gave up. And when Paul looked at me, I remembered what it felt like to be someone's desire instead of just their obligation. Andy was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "I didn't stop wanting you because I stopped loving you. I stopped touching you because I didn't know how to meet your needs. And over time, it became easier not to try at all than to keep failing." He looked broken when he said it. Like a man who'd been failing an exam he didn't even know how to study for, I cried. Not because it fixed anything, but because it finally made sense. Strange beginnings. Things didn't magically heal after that, but something opened up. We started talking, not about the past, not about Paul, but about us. About now. One night, after a long conversation, he asked, "Do you still want to be married to me?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. What I did know was this. I didn't want to go back to the way things were. That marriage, the one where we coexisted like housemates who occasionally coordinated dinner plans, that had to die. But something new, something honest, something built from the wreckage and not around it, that I was willing to explore. We slept in separate rooms for a while, not as punishment, but as permission to reset, to think, to grieve the version of our marriage we were finally brave enough to admit hadn't worked in years. Andy began to read more about intimacy, desire, kink. He came to me one day and said, "I think I was using your infidelity as a way to reconnect with you without admitting I felt inadequate." I told him gently that I wasn't ready to be someone's shame-fueled fantasy. I wanted to be wanted, not turned into a trigger. He nodded. "I'm learning. So am I. The choice